Welcome back to the Smarter Marketer podcast, brought to you by Rocket Agency. I'm your host, James Lawrence. Welcome back to the Smarter Marketer podcast. I'm here today with Paul Sinkinson. Paul, welcome to the pod.
Thank you very much.
Very, very excited for today's conversation. So Paul has been Managing Director of Australia of Analytic Partners for the past 8 years. Analytic Partners is a global marketing consultancy that works with organizations to help them understand the impact of their marketing spend. Paul has over 20 years of analytics and marketing measurement experience working with Australia as well as leading global brands around the world. I saw Paul present at South by Southwest last year as part of a discussion around the new era of marketing accountability. I found it fascinating. I think there was lots of information being shared that lots of marketers that I deal with would kind of would nod in agreement and kind of be saying a lot of things that I think a lot of us feel but often don't have the data to prove it. And so today we're going to be discussing, I guess, the holy grail of marketing, measuring the impact of marketing. So big topic area. And I was kind of thinking about today's pod, and every marketer I speak to, everyone in our agency, we've all heard that, just prove it's working and I'll spend more. I know half of my marketing budget's wasted. I just don't know which half. What do you see the biggest challenges for marketers out there? I've probably got some kind of my thoughts on it, but I'll be curious as to what are the challenges that you find marketers are having in kind of getting this buy-in and adoption?
I guess sometimes some businesses, and I'll talk, when I was client side, some businesses, marketing is viewed as the Chardonnay and the Crown Brigade, right? Which is, like a horrendous indictment on the profession. But, it's what some, hardened old sales directors have definitely said in meetings that I've been in before. So there's that credibility. There's having hard metrics as well. Like if marketing's sitting there talking about awareness or, like intent and this sort of stuff, and the rest of the business is talking about sales, you get that misalignment. And immediately you kind of get left out of some of those discussions because you can't contribute or link into it. So I think, like that part of the big parts for people to get that buy-in. I think, CMO turnover is probably another one as well, having that network. So, you kind of see those CMOs who lean into those discussions and bring people along from the start. So it being very much a senior stakeholder engagement is I think, the key to overcoming it.
Yeah, and getting that kind of cross-functional support, right, and buy-in from the business. Because I think in terms of the clients that we work with, we're working in the kind of performance digital space, right? And the more transactional that a product might be, generally it's getting easier for us to kind of say, this channel's working for you guys, and if you do this and if you do that, we can show a return on investment and, attribution, paths to purchase. For clients that are on a kind of much more complex path to purchase, longer buyer cycle, often, more B2B than B2C. Like in terms of what you're doing, I think a lot of our clients in that complex path to purchase would just love the idea of ice cream and weather and summer and winter and those types of things. Like how do you find it on your side of the fence when you are dealing with kind of slower moving sales cycles, lots of stakeholders, lots of touch points compared to something that might be a little bit more transactional?
It's a fun one, to be honest. I mean, there's more data, there's more complexity there, and so it's great. The time lag is a big one. I'm so playing, and I think, that's one of the fundamentals that I'll, hopefully be able to go on and on about as we kind of progress around the long term versus the short term. But I think if we could kind of touch on that transactional digital attribution part to start with, I think it's one of the challenges that we've got now that we didn't have when attribution started. I'm old, you can kind of see some of these gray hairs in this road. So,
For those listening, Paul's stroking the side of his hair.
Yeah. And look, that, when it started, we had every data that was sitting there, right? So we had every interaction that you did. We could track everywhere you'd been on the internet before you came to our site through the magical cookies. And we'd know exactly that path to purchase. there was always that argument of online versus offline activity, right? Of like, oh, look, you're not accounting for offline, but at least in the online world, we knew everything. It was all fine. Now we don't. So, if you look at it within, like iOS, right, 54% of Australians opted out of crossing, which means that you're getting a dead signal. In terms of ad blockers, like 36% of Australians have got ad blockers. Like now that, Google's kind of restricting access to some stuff, hopefully that comes down a bit, but that's still a massive amount, which means you don't have all of that data coming through. So, we did an experiment looking at some of our clients' data, saying, what's the impact of that, of not having the data, let alone, like anything else, but just violating that assumption of having all of the online data. What's the impact? We recreated some attribution models, just a mixed model approach, so that, we weren't getting into the first or last reading. But we saw 59% of the online events and interactions were missing because of those factors, which is massive, right? We dug into it to look at, well, what's the impact on conversions then? But you're only missing 8% of the conversions, which kind of stumped me a bit, right? But then you realize the way that most of the models are being done through, like Adobe or GA, you've still got that search component. You've still got like that last thing that people did. So you're picking up that. But what it does mean is, in the old days, there used to be an average of like 4 interactions on each journey. It's around, like say around 2 to 2.5 at the moment. As you take out that data from the like of, ad blockers and from cross-site tracking, comes down to 1.4. So you're missing a whole lot of stuff. And it means that then that impact isn't equal across all channels. So, you're missing, say, because of walled gardens as well, missing, say, 80% of the social impact. You're missing 50% video. So then you're not seeing what things are actually driving the impact, which means you're going to invest wrong, right? You're going to overinvest in other things, and you're going to underinvest in social and video as a result of it, just because of the data degradation. So it's a real problem, right, of knowing, of thinking we know what we do, but because our view of it's getting smaller and smaller, it's only going to get worse with more guidance and privacy. That is violating some of those concerns, which once again kind of like comes back to it, because I don't think mixed and replaced with an attribution model does. And it's not real time. Anybody who tells you it is real time, it's lying, essentially. So it's the combination of the two of them together to be able to overcome those issues. So I think that, like a mixed model is needed, and there's actually even complexity in those things that we think are simple and short-term and transactional, like buying something online. I think that there's more to it now. But I think as well, a lot of the base value has been extracted out of some of that transactional stuff. So now it's about the combination of things is where, the real value creation is for our clients, right? So what digital activity do you do? What stuff do you do in relation to external conditions, and when, seasonality? How do you scale that when, your client's doing a whole lot of TV? What does that mean you should do, and when, right? Are the factors that come through. So I think that embracing the complexity is key. And then, that kind of comes down to how you deal with data, because there's loads and loads of it, right? Clearly, but it's how you stop yourself getting drowning in it, really, and how you deal with, data deprecation and data gaps. And, once again, it kind of comes back to that trio of tools, because if you don't have the data for it, an experiment can create it for you.
Yeah, interesting. And it is just so true, where I think we probably might be a similar age, where I think there has been this journey where I kind of came into this space from performance digital very much, paid search ads, right? And back in the day, it was so linear. It was, we would go out there and say, give us a test budget, right? Let us test against what you're getting through Yellow Pages or leaflet drops or whatever it might be. Give us X amount of money. I'll get you this many clicks, this many leads. If the sales from the leads outweighs, the spend, you'll keep spending more. And I think as a community, digital marketers kind of forward this notion that everything can be measured and all decisions should be made on data. We've now got this kind of confluence of issues, right? One is exactly what you mentioned in terms of privacy, and the data that we used to once get, we are no longer getting. Data itself isn't always accurate, right? Like what we see in GA is kind of an estimate, it's an aggregation, it's a model, it's what Google thinks might be happening. We look at that data versus what we see in platform, which will be different again. And then I think we've also just got the reality, which is things are more complex now, right? Where it's much harder, that it's more unlikely now that that path will be one click, fill out a form, and away we go. And it's, months and months of being nurtured, and it's things you might see on YouTube or things you might see on LinkedIn that then you might say to someone in the real world, which will then drive a real world action. And it is very difficult. What advice would you give to a marketer, and maybe a marketer that doesn't have, millions of dollars being invested in their marketing budget in TV and social and every channel, but just practically, like, what would be some ways that you might want to demonstrate or test that, whatever you're doing is social may or may not be working, or like how do you advocate for? I think the constant push we have is sales. You kind of touched on the gnarly old sales director. It's kind of, marketing should be driving leads, and, we're on this campaign and generate leads. And often it's kind of like, yeah, but, we haven't been doing the brand work for the last 2 years to generate those leads. Like, what are some practical tips that you'd give to a marketer in that kind of environment?
It's an interesting one, right? And this is where I go and almost contradict myself. Because everything I think in measurement's relative rather than being absolute. So smaller client, that's still where performance marketing and pumping your money into some search works a treat. Right?
Speak to a rocket agency.
There's definitely a trade-off as you get bigger and people know your brand, and you've got distribution, digital distribution, physical distribution, you've got brand awareness, you've got brand consideration. And there's that tipping point where, and it always should be, like, is your organic search growing, or is your organic search coming down as your paid search goes up or down? And I think, there's those sorts of litmus tests that you can do of at what point should you come off performance marketing? Because definitely when you're starting out, there's nothing that's going to be so efficient and drive such great results for you, right? It very much is. And as you scale, then you need to start to transform and into other things. And I think, with that paid activity, and particularly when you're small, it will literally be as simple as on and off, particularly if it's genuine performance, because, if you're not doing creative, that is brand creative, that is supposed to work over a longer time period, it's going to decay very quickly. So you'll be able to show it with marketing. But I think at a small scale, it is actually staying with that stuff and going for it. Yeah. As you get bigger, I think, a lot of people think that you need to have just tremendous scale to be able to have, decent measurement. But I think that you can get there pretty quickly on small spends.
Yeah. We definitely come across so many clients that have kind of gone through that first phase of growth, and it often is running, hard-nosed performance campaigns, SEO, Google Ads, word of mouth marketing, maybe some kind of sales-oriented activity. And it's that next bit, which is like we've hit these initial growth goals, and now we need that next phase of growth. And I think it is often this expectation that what worked before will keep working, and it just doesn't. It feels to me that is when you start needing to go out there and do a lot of the brand work, which is that next tier of growth.
Exactly. And that's where you can start seeing that cannibalization, right? Or, organic activity, where you can start having it, your paid activity coming in and just be picking up that organic stuff that your other marketing is driving for you. Look, if you were a business and you're pretty confident that you're going to become like $100 million business and you're going towards it, my recommendation is to invest the time up front with coming up with some great brand creative. And when I say creative, I mean creative platform, right? Because you want to be building out some distinctive assets that you can hold on to for like 10 years. You want to be building creative that you can hold on to for a long time. Like when we run these models for larger clients, it's a controversial one. It was definitely challenging for me because I come from a trade background at retail, right? Like you stack it high, put a special sticker on it and watch it fly out of the store. But brand creative outperforms performance messaging 80% of the time. And it was dark to me, right? Because that always seemed a little bit kumbaya sitting around on beanbags to me, rather than hard hitting.
And that statistic, is that in the short term?
Even in the short term. There's a few reasons for it, right? It's not because like brand creative makes us feel emotional or something like that. There's definitely probably a part of it. But there's two also functional cold hard ones that do it. Brand ad hits your entire business, right? So we always have this metric that we call business size exposed, that, if you're selling, say, 20 widgets and you do an ad for widget one, I'm going to buy widget one. Widget one, is great. It's going to give you, so like 100% left on widget one sales, but nothing on widgets 2 to 20, or like very little on it. But if you do an ad for the entire business, it might only give you a 10 to 15%, but it goes across all of those widgets. So because it exposes more of the business, and it drives more business for you overall. The other reason,
what did you describe that as, that metric, or that
business size exposed? So just how much that ad is kind of like touching when it tries to promote it to people. And the other one is how long you can keep that creative working for you, right? Because, if you're putting a price point, obviously once that special's over, you've got to take it out of market. You can't use it anymore. If you're promoting a product, the product's no longer in store or in your range, you've got to take it off. But that brand ad, you can keep going for as long as until it does wear out, which is, like one of the other fun studies that we've got of having tested, 51,000 odd bits of creative to say that financially worn out, not like worn out. That financial wear out, was the cost of making that new creative offset by this tremendous return you got putting in the new creatives. And of the 51,000 that we tested, 14 times, yes, they had worn out, but every other time it hadn't. We'd thrown it away well before consumers.
Well, I think I was looking back at my notes from your session at South by Southwest, and a question was asked you, how long can a campaign go for? And your response was, I don't know, because a marketer has killed it before I could tell you.
Yeah,
and the whole room laughed.
Because clearly it's going to wear out at some point, but we just do it so quickly. I've even seen people make TV campaigns and run them for like 300 apps, and that's that ever, which is criminal. I've got some of my larger clients who do 300 apps in 1 week, let alone anything else. So it's really important, I think, to realize that you can run things for longer, and that a brand creative is that very thing. And that's, just even the platform, right? So you'll be switching out the creative under the same platform and getting greater and greater values for it. We've had one client who was doing it really inconsistently. It was at least 15% of their budget, but it was inconsistent. They'd do it for, it's like an 8-week campaign, a whole lot of time off, another 6 weeks. They really kind of doubled down on it, ran it for 40 of the year. So it's at least 25% of their budget. And after 4 years, that ROI went up 2.5 times. Same platform. So instead of getting, say, $1, they were getting $2.50 just from being consistent behind it. And that's why we will say that, consistency is the unheralded superhero of marketing effectiveness. Just don't change it. Every time you think, I think we should change this, don't. Wait until the third time you should change it, and then maybe.
It's a great line. Do you have any rules of thumb around that? Like back in the day, it cost $2 million to make a beer ad, and then we're going to spend X amount of million on amplifying it. Is it that kind of way of doing it, or are you just looking at it and this hard-nosed, I don't care until I start to see metrics that suggest and prove that, the audience is sick and tired of seeing this ad? Like, what are you looking for, or how do you set it up?
I would really, I'm just looking to see the result fall away. So we're just kind of saying, look, is the response from showing that ad getting lower? And then I think the thing is as well, because, like once again, as I say, in mix, it's always about the mix, right? It's never black and white, this good, that bad. It's always how much. So it's not just about having brand. You will also need, your performance marketing coming in. So as that brand ad does maybe start to wear out a bit, you'll, put in your performance metrics on there. Like if you're a retailer, could you just have brand year round and that? No, definitely not. Particularly going into the current conditions we've got, right? You need to be saying, hey, we're good price. We're good value. You need to be reinforcing those hygiene, basic table stakes. But you're doing that at the same time, which then also means that you kind of give the creative chance to freshen up and people to not get too bored.
Would you generally, in terms of, because obviously the mix of brand and short-term demand gen performance, whatever we call it, will jump around depending on the industry and the customer and the client. Would you generally suggest that, like, the long and the short of it, Benet and Fields is a good place for people to start in terms of what that mix should be for them in their industry?
To be honest, I think it's a bit risky at the moment. The reason why I say it's risky, I think it's where everybody should end. But at an average, once again, and let's be very, very clear. Look, this is an average. It's not, and it personnels. The problem with moving, like if you are 90-10 the other way around, right? You're cycling against those numbers. So you need to be showing, hey, like sales are down this week, because we've pulled out of performance, which we've pulled out of our price performance. What do we know? That pays off right at the time, right? It's got an immediate response and feedback for us. So you're taking away from it for stuff that, pays off better, but pays off over a long time. So it's a skyscraper standing up versus a skyscraper down on its side, right? But you've got all of those weeks to wait until that comes through and until you get that scale. And there's a lot of businesses that don't have that luxury at the moment, right? They'll only take a 20% hit in sales while they wait for it to come back with the knowledge. It will, but can they wait that long? So I think it's about small steps towards it.
Yeah.
I think that's kind of the key. And we do see a lot of people make those knee-jerk changes and go fully the other way. And then the CFO goes, oh, what's going on? Last month's rating was terrible. And so they jump back the other way. And then they go, oh, brand doesn't work because they did it for like 1 month. And it takes a long time for that to build. So my advice would very much be small steps towards it. What we've seen is once you get under 30% of your spend on brand, your ROIs are punished because your brand activity makes your performance activity perform better. There's a synergy between them, right? If you've got brand activity going on, there's a synergy. It means that your price works better, your search works better, because when you pop up, people go, oh, I know one, it's your brand, right? And so there's a benefit from it. So I'm not saying that 30% is where you should be. What I'm saying is 30% is the floor. That's somewhere above 30%. That's probably, where less than people say, but be aware that under that level, you're doing harm.
Yeah.
You know that even your performance ROIs fall away then.
Yeah, interesting. I think it segues maybe nicely. Mark Ritson has a line around great brand creative will drive short-term sales, but rarely does great short-term activity drive long-term sales. And I think it probably then ties into what you're saying before, right? Which is the brand messaging, it does outperform, short for those reasons that you explained. But I think then obviously a lot of it comes down to the creative, right? And if you're going to go off kind of knee jerk and put out in market a pretty average brand campaign and try to test it after a month, you're setting yourself up for failure. But can we talk about creative? I guess because I love the idea of talking creative with someone in an organization that is so metric driven, right? Like how important is creative?
Massively. So if you're talking video, I get into these discussions, right? I'll sit there with all these metrics. So it would be, I said before on TV, what day of week's best? What weight should you be? What demographic should you be going after? What shows? What duration? What network? What time of the year? All of these sorts of factors. And they drive third of your potential ROI improvement. 2 it comes from a creative. That thing where we go, unlike that, with about that much science in it often, right? There's testing that happens, but it's still very much an art, which, something that I'm never going to try and put, like too much scientific rigor behind. I'm great at measuring the impact of it. And what we know is it's vitally important. It's driving 2/3 of that value, which is why I say it's worth investing the time to make sure that you've got it right rather than rushing it. The other reason why it's worth taking the time is that thing that you're trying to replace probably hasn't worn out, so it can last for a little bit longer while you take the time to invest in and do it properly.
Okay, backwards way of thinking of it. I know there was a Nielsen study, I think it was maybe a year or two ago. I can't remember that where you get the 2/3, 1/3 effectiveness.
No, this is based off our work where we've kind of done it. So, you go through it. You can only do it retrospectively where there's, creative testing, because you can take in then, the pre-test scores, post-test scores. You can take, the reach that it actually achieved and all that sort of stuff. So it's a retrospective, I'm looking back to see how much of the impact.
I can't remember the exact number, but I think very similar. It's quite incredible how the percentage of importance of creative kind of dwarfs the way the media is being bought. And then second of all, the brand, right? Obviously the brand matters as well.
100%. And it can be hard sometimes to get people to to realize, one, the impact of brand, but also the impact of things not wearing out. And it was one of the, obviously COVID was a horrendous thing for everybody. But for some marketing analysts, it actually created some opportunity we never would have otherwise been able to.
Mm-hmm.
So, we had one client who, because they had supply issues, they had to pull all their performance advertising because they didn't have enough supply. They couldn't put price promotions out yet. They couldn't post on products, so they couldn't advertise those. So they just had brand advertising, and even that at low rates because they were worried about what was going to happen. Sales did fall off the cliff because it was brand that was holding it up, and it was the one time we were able to show somebody by them only having brand on for about weeks, 12 weeks even, the impact that brand was having.
Really interesting.
Yeah. So people would have been able to get them to do it because it was, like a major advertiser. The other one was a beer brand. Like beer brands, they always make these beautiful ads, right? Like, 60-second, definitely getting entered into a creative show. It's sort of bad. Because of lockdowns, they couldn't get out making creative. So they had to show the same old one. So I remember, from this very room doing the presentation, they're like, "Oh God, Paul, how bad was it?
Numbers are going to be bad." You're like, best they've ever been.
Yeah, exactly. It had finally had a chance to wear in. It was a higher ROI than ever before because people now knew it and was able to do that job of reminding people rather than having to build the memory structures, build those associations. It was instead leveraging what had already been built.
And you can test that even against, because obviously beer at the time sales would have been up, right? With us all drinking way too much than we should have at home. You can kind of measure that equally.
Yeah, and that's the benefit of commercial mix model. I mean, the hard reality is marketing in the short term, at least, is doing somewhere between 5 or 10% of total sales. It's the other 90. It's not even 80-20. It's like 90-10 or 95-5 of what's driving it. So we spend most of our time working on the 90 to 95, and then get to the marketing media side of things.
Really, really interesting. Yeah, amazing that we'll look back in 20 years' time and COVID will have been this kind of laboratory for what happens when you keep kids, homeschooled for a year and, telehealth and all these other things. I wouldn't have thought that I was going to be, testing how long a beer ad should run for.
Exactly.
Not bad. I'm not sure if you'll have an answer for this, but the hallmarks of good creative, or is this just something you don't really kind of pay that much attention to, or is it something you pay a lot of attention to?
Look, on TV, I spend less time looking at it because we've been doing it for so long that I think we're getting good at knowing what's going to be good creative and what's not. Well, we're getting good at picking bad creative. Let's say maybe we're not great at picking good creative, but we're good at picking opportunities. Spend a lot of time looking at online creative because there's a huge variation. The variation is really, really broad because we're still figuring it out. And there's a lot of stuff that can easily be done. We're learning in this space, but if you've got your creative fit for purpose, your ROI can be 3.5 times higher. And that's not just a digital thing, right? It's like out of home. Out of home advertising, always the afterthought. What is it? Is it actual or is it the in frame of the TV set? It's one of the two, right? Very, very really doesn't get the same sort of creative thought and investment that a TV ad does. But it's the same with a lot of video, right? It's the TVC. And it's not good enough. So, there's things like out of frame shots, definitely needed. You can't have these huge vistas because the screen's smaller, right? Like brighter, high contrast colors, large focus groups, getting movement happening fast, having a different sort of story arc. So, the old idea of the TV, of the Hollywood story arc where the reveal was right at the end.
Yeah.
Paying attention to it online, right? Particularly if you can skip after 3 seconds, right?
Yeah.
So you need that heartbeat story arc of some excitement that comes through rather than only having the reveal at the end. So it's a different form of storytelling. You can do still, edits on the TV feed that are considered, getting the action going faster, hyping up colors, getting tight on the shots, those sorts of things. But ideally, you've got your creative being done differently, which is, I think, more for me where it comes is how the creative brief comes out, because I think there's a secret in there, not necessarily making your creative for the best TV scene, but making your creative best for the campaign. So if you're going to have a campaign across TV, social, YouTube, BVOD and out of home. It needs to work as a 30, 15, a 10, a 6, a 3, and a static. And so that idea should be expressed like that before any script gets written, which might mean that, it's not the best TV ad, but it's the best campaign that's going to drive across everything. Because there's this huge synergy from combining channels and from having those distinctive assets, leverage across. Even, like radio is a massive one, right? How many radio ads are there where it's basically like a read rather than a connection from what you're seeing online? Donald's is one that stands out, right? Like, that little jingle at the end of their TV ads, which plays on the radio, you don't even have to be in the room and you've been served McDonald's advertising, right? Bringing a whole lot of associations to the front of mind, but so many people aren't doing it. So it's going through that, making sure that the creative works across everything. And it's, it's that one creative idea being brought across it rather than people having to reimagine what a creator was thinking when they came up with that TV script.
That's awesome. Really good summary. Like we probably pick up at the tail end of that in terms of digital, where it is kind of, whatever the TVC is, well, let's just run that on YouTube or BVOD, or we'll just chop it up and it'll be fine on, or take this kind of social video content and it'll be fine on TikTok and on YouTube and on Instagram and Facebook, and even between our channels, right? Like what works on Instagram versus what works on TikTok are two very, very different things, right? So it's kind of,
It's even a tool of this type of storytelling, right? Like I find it really interesting. Since the 60-second TVC is now so expensive, very few people are doing it. It's very hard to make it work. You've got to basically know that you're doing it or lost now. So people thought that, long form TV advertising gone, or maybe the cinema was the only place that you could put it. And actually the highest ROIs that we see online are long form advertising. So, even up to like 90 seconds, 3 minutes, but that's not then like a long ad. It's a story that the brand's in and a story around the brand. So a different form of storytelling, but it is, like where that true art form of telling a long and interesting story can exist is online. There's no like creatives need to, somehow compromise themselves or the idea that they want to put out. It can literally start there and then come down.
It's interesting, isn't it? It's going to be like contextually relevant, right? And like setting that from the outset as opposed to kind of getting towards the tail end and how do we kind of output this in the formats that are needed?
It's a really interesting point, the contextual part of it, because there's a lot of chat about with cookies going, how do you do your behavioral advertising? How do you do your behavioral targeting? And part of me thinks, cool, it stops you doing that thing that you thought was working was never really working, because a lot of the data used for that targeting was iffy at best. There's some great studies even done by Nico Newman, Melbourne Business School, showing that the quality of data from third-party data sets, even gender, was a coin toss accurate, let alone whether you're a dog owner, anything else, right? It was particularly. So you were targeting people on data that wasn't great. How great would that behavioral targeting come? Contextual advertising, though, is 30% better. For us, one of the few things digitally that we can see, and I talked before about this massive range of digital performance, but that contextual advertising online is massive. So I think that sports advertising, sports creative on sports website, it makes sense, right? But it is, I think, getting people to start thinking about how you can do more contextual advertising, and once again, not just contextual. What I'm suggesting. But how you can get more contextual and how you can be smarter about contextual. And that might need to then, go back into the creative brief again.
Interesting. And it feels that is particularly performance digital, where it kind of is heading in this kind of cookieless world. And you look at how good, like no one really knows, but where Google looks to be taking the product a lot, like I think contextually more relevant than kind of how we're targeting an audience. And the outdoor one's interesting. We had a presentation from oMedia, and they, first of all, just they talk so much about the need for outdoor copy, like outdoor advertising is completely different to every other form, and it's kind of like has to be 6 words or less. And they talked a lot about context. And one of the case studies they use, I think, is Cooper's Beer, where they kind of play beautifully into like where the actual sign is located. And there was a good example of one was next door to a tire shop, and they used the word tire, and it came together so beautifully. And it clearly wasn't just a chop up of, some other campaign they've been running and trying to make it work across all their outdoor sites. It was kind of an interesting one.
being out of home is really interesting because then you kind of see once again getting the context right of like out of home near pub has a tremendous ROI. It's massively impactful, but they're like more brand where it makes you feel better about going in and ordering. Whereas in a retail setting, something that's near the liquor stores, it's far more about call to action. It's far more about, price points and offers and that sort of stuff. It worked really well. So even kind of getting that. And then, the performance of out of home for liquor near liquor stores is nowhere near as strong because price just does so much because the price points are so high, right? They're discounting swallows up a huge amount of the impact. But obviously in a pub, there's very little price discounting going on. You don't even know what the price is until they tell you after you've ordered it, right?
It's a lot of moment.
Yeah, exactly. Jesus, I'm not ordering another one today. So the impact of that messaging and that format so much more. So, even kind of thinking about that, like where are your sites for out of home or where are your sites online? It's exactly the same.
It's really interesting. Might be a segue or might not be. The space that we play in, I think where all marketers are, right? There's all this talk about AI and jobs going or tasks going and kind of AI doing all these things that, we humans once did. How do you see it impacting your space? Like, is AI just this panacea? Is it a useful tool? Is it all fear mongering? Like, what do you predict in 5 years' time? Are we closing the loop, or are we we're still there, just as many difficulties and depends and asterisks as there kind of always has been?
Yes, see all of the above. Just kind of, it's definitely helped us, right? Like automation has been massive for us, particularly like data and everything, to the point now where the processes are faster than the data itself and we can't really get it out. And it's putting real pressure on the way that people store data and, the details that they put into the data sets. Yeah. Processing and transforming data used to take that long. Now it's almost instantaneous. Having said that, obviously Gartner put AI at the very peak of their hype cycle in terms of inflated expectations last year. And there's people out there spruiking that, it's going to be sentiment at the end of the year, at the end of the decade, with this huge amount of confidence. And are we going to get there? Yes. Sorry, not to sentence, but like to, a lot of the promises, yes, we definitely are. Are we there now? No. And one of the proof points of that is hallucinations, right? So, University of Shanghai has done a lot of research into the hallucinations that exist in AI. There's some famous examples of it, right? Like, when Google launched Bard, it wasn't performing very well, and that was because of the hallucinations. Microsoft's Sydney, that was telling people or telling Bing workers that it was spying on them, and it was professing its love for users, which is clearly not what they were wanting. There's a famous example with a researcher typing into GPT-3, should I film myself? And it's saying, yes, you definitely should, which is clearly, not what they wanted. But the hallucinations make sense if you remember what the model's trying to do is predict what words should come next of what it's seeing and its training data set, right? And if you think a lot of it being trained off the internet, this dark, scary place, it's the fear, right? There's, gender bias, there's ethnic bias, there's, loads of horrible things in there. But also, what it tells us is the models weren't, and I would argue still aren't, capable of validating that it's a hallucination. So put it another word, it can't validate the output. So it can't validate the input either. So now everything that you looked at, it's still saying you need a human overview of it. You need human supervision to make sure that those hallucinations don't go through because it still can't validate the output. So I think that's very important to remember when there's people out there spruiking that. My LinkedIn's probably full of, some different people to yours, and it's full of a lot of AI experts saying, I am calling BS on this. I am so sick of the lies that have been told, just trying to bring people back with the whole side. Because, people have these inflated expectations. We're not going to be able to deliver to them. So they want to realistic. We're making huge progress and it's really helpful, but, we're not there yet. We still don't believe that AI can produce models independently and needs that person, can it speed up a hell of a lot? Yeah. definitely we've seen huge improvements in the length of time to run our models because of it. But there's that legal and privacy compliance part that comes across at the top, right? There's a lot of people playing with stuff who maybe don't realize the repercussions of it. So we're like our legal teams all over it in terms of, if you've got the generative AI product, who owns the IP that comes out of it based off what it's been trained on, and that hasn't yet really gone through the courts yet. So you've done what change. So you've got to be very careful of that. How do you stay compliant with all the data regulations while you're doing, this could change. So we've got to be very careful. But then, we're doing some fun stuff with it. So if I talked about those training sets of data, we've got what we call the ROI genome, LOP, and it's because we've been doing this for 24 years now, we've got hundreds and hundreds of billions of dollars across multiple countries, multiple categories within our collective wisdom of the ROI genome. So it's a training set marketing like nothing else. But within that, we're carving out to say, okay, this is just this client so that we know it's privacy compliant, we know it's legally compliant as well. And then we're creating, a product called Ask Genome, where you can use generative AI to ask about your marketing rather than having to, necessarily even click through everything. You can use that sort of a platform. So, we're getting to there. But yeah, until they figure out a way to get rid of hallucinations, no, and we keep going, oh, we'll fix that one. And another one comes out, so we put them fixing more. So there's constantly having to put fixes on stuff, which tells us we haven't systematically dealt with it yet.
Yeah, interesting perspective. Nice segue. I think in terms of that, the insights that your clients are getting by being able to pull information out of their data sets. In preparing for today, found it was a really awesome ebook that you guys published a few years back now. I think it was the 20 Insights for 20 Years, which was based on your first 20 years as a consultancy, which we'll link to in the show notes. And I think I found it from a written article, basically describing one of the graphs as the greatest graph he'd ever seen in the history of marketing, and it basically validated everything he's ever spoken about. But yeah, really, it's interesting. I think for from a firm that deals so much in data, so much of it was also just kind of just themed and concepts, which we try to kind of help our clients with as well. And probably where you kicked off the show in terms of just cross-function and stakeholders and how do you actually set yourself up for success. But we definitely recommend anyone interested in today downloading a copy of that. But do you guys publish much because you've shared lots of stats with us from your own data? Are there ways that listeners can access that if they are interested and are available?
Yeah, we're constantly putting out white papers. We're constantly putting out what we call genome flashes. Actually, if you go onto the website and sign up, you will be supplied every time that we put out new content. You'll be sent through. It's definitely something that we're trying to do, which is just pass on that wisdom, which is where the likes of Wisdom kind of found it.
Yeah,
we put it out. It's a pretty rigorous approach that we do of making sure that it is generalizable, because we go across so many countries, across so many categories. We make sure that it is a replicable finding across, all of the studies to do it. And obviously that there's enough data behind it that it's, not relying on one category or one industry.
Yeah, awesome.
It's insight that comes out that I would definitely recommend go and sign up. And, we send it out, probably at least once a month.
Awesome. We'll include a link to that. Paul, it's been awesome chatting to you. We finish every episode with this question. What's your best piece of career advice for an in-house marketer?
Don't change things. Consistency, I think, is really important. It's interesting as well. You're kind of saying before about, the themes and patterns and stuff that you help people. I think don't get so caught up by the new fads and the new shiny toys. I sometimes feel like a bit of a report and telling people I'm literally pulling out 1950s insights for them. Sometimes it feels like, right, but it's still true. There's a foundational knowledge in marketing that's been built up over by time. It's been tested time and time again, and it still stands up. Don't think that some new shiny toy coming out challenges. Have confidence on the foundational work that sits there, which is something that Mr. Ritson says himself, right? Get that foundational knowledge and move on. So one, don't change your campaigns until you're really, really sure. That needs to be a massive bar that's set there. But also don't change your understanding of marketing because it's something new and shiny come along.
It's absolutely brilliant. And I think for those marketers out there that are worried about AI, I think sticking to those foundational concepts, understanding what purpose marketing plays in an organization and what role it is you as a senior marketer, will put you in good stead many, many years into the future. Cool. Paul, thank you so much for coming on. It's been a great chat.
No worries. Thanks a lot.